fixed to the board that you were supplied. If it's not getting fixed to a board, it will be fixed to the workbench. So just screw them to the other side of the board. So once you've done that, we then need to check our diagonals. So we check from one corner to the other corner, making sure they're exactly the same. If they're not the same, you then need to make the small adjustment. We know that our frame is nice and square. We need to do a couple of things to mark our rafters and our ceiling joist positions. First thing we do is we measure it across. Now this is called the span of the roof. So it's pitched from this side to that side. So that's the length of the roof, which we call the span. So we need to measure that and we need to write that down on our board or our piece of paper. So that hour is 12:15. Once we have our span, then we can mark in our half span. So once we've got that, we divide that in half and we mark the centre of that. Put a little C with a circle across it. Okay, so whatever our half span is, we then measure from this corner. Now, this is going to be our hip corner, so the roof's going to go up like you saw at the beginning of the video here of the final roof. So we're going to go up from this end with our hips. So we need to measure our half span back from the hip end. So whatever our half span was, we mark that on that side. We square that line across. Now, to the left side of that, so away from the hip, is where our first rafter is going to sit. So we mark that with an R. We do the same on this side here. So we'll measure across. We will mark that same half span that we got from the end, and we'll mark that across, which is our first rafter. So these will be our first two common rafters that will come up to the hip, to the ridge, sorry. Then the rest of the space, we're going to have a rafter right at the end here, we know that, and then the rafters will be then at 450 centimetres. If the last is a little bit smaller, that's fine, as long as it's not any bigger than 450. So I'll go ahead and I'll mark our rafter spacings at 450 centimetres. So 450, 900, square those lines across, mark rafter and ceiling joint. So as you can see, the mark, one side will be the rafter and the other side will be the ceiling joist. So you can see the C that's marked there, which is the centre of our half span. So all I'm going to do now is mark in half my 35mm thickness, so I get the side of my rafter. Now this position here will also be the side of my ridge. Right, next thing we need to do is cut and fit our ceiling joist. Now our ceiling joists are going to run across the roof. So you've already marked them in next to the rafters, so you just need to measure the length of them. Make sure, but after you've cut your ceiling joists to size, it's time to fit them to your wall plates. Look along the edge of each one of them, make sure that they're bowing up. So when it's time to nail them, what I would suggest you do is put a nail just on the rafter side there, push it up against it. That way you can skew down through the other edge and it won't slide across onto where the position of the rafter is. When you're skewing down, make sure that you're in at least 70mm from the end to stop splitting. So just skew around there. Okay, our last ceiling joist here, it doesn't sit on the outside of the wall. Now ceiling joists are there to support the ceiling load, so the plaster load. So we need to position this last ceiling joist in level with the inside edge of the wall plate. So then the plasterboard can be nailed to the underside of it. So we'll position this last one at the end there. The next thing we need to measure is our trimmers coming up this end for our ceiling joist. Now because we have rafters coming up on an angle here like this, we can't run a ceiling joist across the end. So what we have to do is we have to run little trimmers from our last ceiling joist through to the edge of our wall. Our last ceiling joist, which would be 450 away from the end, to the outside edge of our wall plate. We'll cut them and then fit them in. We've cut and fitted our little trimmers here. So again, we're going to nail them in position. Now don't nail them in the centre where this last rafter is going to go. Make sure you're to the left or to the right, it doesn't really matter. The next thing we're going to fit is what they call a hanging beam. Now, hanging beam supports the centre of the ceiling joist, and that sits on top of the block, that last trimmer that you fitted in, and runs through and supported at the other end. So you need to measure the total overall roof length. Again, our trimmer that we've placed in here, which is going to support this end of the ridge, but we need to support this end of the ridge. So what we do here, out of the same joist material, we fit a double block on, and what that will do is that will take the weight of the ceiling joist and directly take it down onto the wall plate. So again, fitted our blocks up that end as well, so we're ready to fit our ceiling joist. Now, remember at this end here, we mark where our ridge is going to sit, so we need to transfer that line up our blocks here to make sure that our ceiling joist is sitting to the side of it. So if that's our ridge side, we will move it to the left, in this case, same as it is up that end. So the first thing we're going to do is fix this end in here. So we can skew nail that once again, just into the blocks that you've nailed on the plate. Right, to the other end, and we're going to fix this in here. Now in this case, we can't skew nail it down to that block there. We have to skew nail it into the end. So what we need to do is hangers here. They hang from our hanging beam down to our ceiling joists and are fixed on with clouts. Now you have to fit them alternative sides. So if you fix this one on this side, the second one will have to be fixed on this side, and then opposites all the way along the house. And that's what supports the ceiling joists from bowing down once they get the weight of the plaster on. So we're going to go again. Now that spike is only there to hold it temporary while you're putting your clouts in. You require 2 clouts in the top and 2 clouts in the bottom. Next thing we need to do is start cutting our rafters. So your trainer at this stage is going to give you a sheet of paper with the pitch of your roof. That means the angle of the roof, and you all have different angles to start off with. So first thing you need to do is get this piece of paper off your trainer, and then we'll go through the next steps. Alright, so once you have your bit of paper from your trainer, I need you to fold it along the black line. So you'll see here on this here, how you have the black line along the edge of the pitch. I need you to fold the paper accurately right along that line. Then get yourself a block of wood that your trainer will supply. We're just going to sit that on that corner there. Then we need 3 bevels. So we're going to set a bevel for 3 different things. We're going to set a rafter plumb cut, a rafter seat cut, and the hip edge cut marked. Then on the piece of timber that you were supplied, mark them on there. And we're just doing this so we can refer back to them next week and the week after over the Then need to use some calculations. Now we need this sheet again, the top section of this sheet, because that will help us work out our rafter length. At the moment we know our rafter is going from here up to our ridge, which is up in the air somewhere. So there's no way we can actually physically measure the length of that at this point in time. So what this sheet helps us is work out how long each of the rafters are going to be. So remember when we first started, we measured from the overall span of the roof, and then we worked out what our halfway point is, which is called our half span. That is also classed as the run of the rafter. So how long the rafter is from this point, looking straight down to this point here. It doesn't help us on the angle, but that's how we go to the sheet. So the first thing you need to do is measure that once again, just to double check. So this one here, yep, to the centre is 610 millimetres. So write that down on your board, 610 millimetres. Then we need to go into this sheet here, and we need to go to the run columns. Now they're the columns that are greyed out in a little bit darker, and we need to convert that from your run to the actual rafter length. Now you've got yourself a piece of timber. If your rafter length is going to be 670, get a piece of timber that's probably about 900 to a metre, because we'll cut the end off later. So the first thing we want to do is get our rafter plumb cut bevel, and we want to mark that across here. Once you've marked that across, you can then go to the drop saw and cut that off. So now we've cut our plumb cut, we can measure our rafter. Now we worked out our length of our rafter from the workbook before, so we just measure that length. We hook it onto the point end, so which is the higher end, which is going to be the top of our roof. We then measure along 667, put a mark there. Now be careful of the round edges on these timbers, making sure that you get a square mark on a round corner. Sometimes you'll need to mark that back on the top, line that up with that line, mark the plumb cut. So it's the same bevel as what you did to mark the top edge, and it's called our plumb cut. Mark that down. Now it goes in the same direction as our plumb cut this end. So we have our plumb cut going down there, and then we have our mark coming down there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cut our little triangle down the bottom, and that's going to what we call seat the rafter, and it's called a bird's mouth. There is a maximum distance you can cut out, and it's 1/4 of the overall length. So if I measure across that line, it says it's 100 millimetres. So the maximum I'm allowed to cut out for a bird's mouth would be 20 millimetres. I can cut less out, but I can't cut any more out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark in 20 millimetres. So I'm going to measure up from the bottom of our rafter, which is, this is the bottom, because that's the top edge. I'm going to measure up 20 millimetres. And I'm going to put a little line across that line. Then I'm going to get my next bevel, which is my seat cut bevel, and I'm going to mark that from that line back down towards the top edge of the rafter, so we end up with a little bird's mouth there that we're going to cut out. And what that will do is that will then make the rafter sit nice and flat. So I'll zoom into that so you can see the plumb cut here. So I've put a little mark on the top like that. I have then used my bevel, the plumb cut bevel again, and I have marked down from the top of the rafter down to the bottom. Then what I have done is I have measured up 20 millimetres from the bottom. So you can see there I've measured up 20 millimetres, and I have put just a small mark across that line. Then I've got my plumb cut bevel, and I've sat that on the bottom of my rafter and slid it up until it lines up with that little mark that I've put on. Then I've drawn a line right across. How I've got my marks, I then plumbed them down across both edges. Just so when I cut it, again, I need to cut it spot on. If I'm a mil wrong on this, it just doesn't go together. And I keep saying the same thing, but so make sure you're accurate with your cutting. So I've got my rafter now, I've sat it up. So when I'm cutting my bird's mouth, I'm cutting straight down. So I've got a 10 saw here, so I'm going to cut that straight down. It's just a lot easier if you put it in the vise and hold it straight. So my cut is straight down, I'm then going to cut it straight down in that direction there. So as you can see here, I've got my line across the top. I'm following that, make sure it's square. It's a little bit harder to start on the big edge. Okay, so I put my seat bevel on there, make sure I cut that right. I'll then also get my plumb cut bevel, and I'll make sure that that's right if there. So once you've cut your rafter and you've double checked that your bird's mouth is right, then do the same steps and cut yourself a second rafter. Then we're going to test it out on the roof to see if all your cuts are right. So exactly the same steps. Don't copy it off this one. Do all your measurements again to make sure that you get it right. If you copy off this one, it'll be slightly different and it won't work. So measure it again, making sure that all your measurements are exactly the same, and cut it all out, double check it, and then we're going to put it together on the roof to see if it works. You have cut your two test rafters. I've fitted one of them up here on one side. I'm going to now sit the other one in and test that our plumb cut. Now they should meet nice, there shouldn't be any gap, and the bird's mouth should be sitting nice and tight down into there. Once you have done that, and I'll show you the plumb cut. So you can see there you've got a nice plumb cut, and there's not much of a gap in the middle there. Now that means all your cutting of your rafters have been done well, and we're ready to do our final finish. Now, what we have to do is we have a ridge board that runs down through the middle of our roof, and each of the rafters push against it. So that needs to sit in there as well. So what we have to do, off each rafter, we have to take half the thickness of our ridge board. So if our ridge board was 40 mil thick, we'd take 20 mil off this one and 20 mil off this one. So it won't be down the edge of the rafter, it will be directly across, so 20 mil directly across. I'll just zoom in and show you that. So it has to be square to the end. So 20 mil in. If it's a 40 mil rafter, if it's a 35 mil rafter, again, you'll just use half of your rafter thickness. Now you have to take it off each one of the rafters. So you have to take half off this and half off the other one. Once you have done that, then we test it with the rafter in there, with the ridge in there, and then we will go through to the next step. Okay, so my ridge is 35 millimeters, so I need 17.5 millimeters on either side. So I'm going to mark 17, just over 17 millimeters there. I will then mark that plumb cut down again, and I'll do this exactly the same on the other one, and that's the amount I will cut off. You've cut half your ridge thickness off the end of each of your two rafters. We'll then pop it back in and put the ridge in the middle of it and test that it's all sitting together nicely and put pattern on it. So we're going to call that our pattern rafter. So we're going to use this rafter to mark off all the rest of our rafters. Now I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rafters, common rafters down the end, and then I'll need a 9th rafter for the front here. Now that's exactly the same as what the common rafter is, so I'll need to then cut out 9 rafters, so I'll show you how to do that next. Okay, now we're cutting out our rafters. What I have done here, you can see at the end here, I've cut all my plumb cuts on all of my rafters. I then line them all up with each other. So I make sure they're all lined up perfectly. I'll move that middle one out there, so they're all lined up, so they're all exactly the same position. Then I have placed my pattern rafters on the two outsides at the moment. Then all I want to do is I want to get a line from the end of my bird's mouth to the end of my bird's mouth on the other side. So I'm just going to get a line across there, line them up, draw a line across each of my rafters. Then the one I have marked pattern, I will then line up with each one. So once I have done that, I'm going to then roll it over on its edge, and I'm going to line the top of the rafter. Now remember, the top of the rafter is the pointy bit, so you can mark it with a T if you like, so you don't get confused. I'm going to line up that corner there, and then the top of my rafter all the way down to here. Then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to mark my bird's mouth. Alright, so this is where I've got my rafter sitting flush this side here at the top. I'm then going to mark my bird's mouth in like there, as I said, with a nice sharp pencil. When I take it away, you can see your lines there. Sometimes if they're different thicknesses, they're not going to go all the way to the ends. So we need to make sure that we transfer those lines across right to the ends of the timber, and then square it down the face. Now one line we've already put there, so that should line up with that, if not there's something wrong, and that's the little piece that we're going to cut out for our bird's mouth. Now we've cut all our rafters, we line them up on the bench, line up the plumb cut end, make sure they're all in line, and then we check the seat of our bird's mouth to make sure that they're all sitting about the same, well, they have to be the same height. Now the rafters are different thicknesses, so this doesn't matter across here as long as our bird's mouth base is all the same height. So at this stage, if you've got a couple that are too high, you can chisel them down just gently like that, but if you've cut them way too small, you'll just have to recut them. now that we've cut our rafters, we're ready to fit them. So on our side of our ceiling joist where we've marked our aft, we're sitting our rafters, sit it down, make sure it's sitting nicely into the bird's mouth, and then we just skew nail it straight down into the top plate. Once you've fitted that there, that should stay. We'll then go ahead and fit the other side. Okay, making sure that it's sitting nice and flat in its bird's mouth. As you can see, the bird's mouth is sitting down nice and flat to the top plate. Don't forget when you're nailing these last rafters that they're going to be right on the outside edge of the wall, because we're going to have a gable end here, so we've got the battens have to run over, so we want them supported right at the end of this wall, so don't position that against the ceiling joist here, position on. Okay, the last common rafter that we're going to fit is at the hip end of the roof, which is from our centre point here, right opposite our hanging beam, and that's going to be the starting position for our ridge. So I'm going to fit that here. Now our ridge has been marked our same centres as our rafters, which is 450, so this is our hip end, so 450 centres, and that positions all of our rafters. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to need some help here to hold this in position. Once I sit it down in between the rafters, I can then nail through the top of the rafters and fix it off. So I'll fix the last two rafters up the end of the roof, and now I'm going to fix this one coming down on the hip just to position it. So we're going to use a screw fixing just because it's sort of easier to hold the roof in position. Obviously on site you'd use a nail gun, so I fit the ridge level with the top of the rafter. I'll then come around and fit the rafter level, the first rafter level there, making sure it's sitting right at the end. The most important thing, as I said, the top of the rafter is level with that top edge of the ridge. So I'm going to go ahead and fit off all the rest of the rafters. After you screw fitted the first rafters at either end, you can then nail your intermediate rafters flush with your ridge. Once you have nailed them all off, then the test is put a straight edge across your rafters, and they should all be at the same height. If they're up and down, when you come down to the bottom here, that means your bird's mouth was wrong or something like that, and you may have to remove one rafter and refit it again. So you can see all the rafters lining up along the ridge there, and also if you go down you can see all the rafters lining up with each other, so they should be spot on as long as you get those bird's mouths correct. Alright, now we're going to cut the corner off for our hip rafter, so I'm just going to show you how to mark that. We're going to zoom into this here, and as you can see I've got some marks here. So how I did that, I sat my rafter so it was centered on the corner, just mark the thickness like that, then got my square, and where those thicknesses got to the edge of the piece of timber, I then marked it across. So cut that small triangle piece off, and that's so our rafter, our hip rafter, can sit nice and square. We don't have to cut the chipboard off, all we've got to do is cut our top plate off, and then we're ready. So when we're up to measuring our hips for our hip rafter, what we have to do is we have to mark the thickness of our rafter in at the ridge end. So I put a centre line in a piece of timber that's the same thickness, and I then mark the two edges. So you can see here I've got my centre mark in my rafter material, my hip material. I line that up with the corner, and I mark the outside edges of my two rafters. So what I'm going to do now is measure from that mark that I've put up there. I'm going to hold the tape on 100 millimetres. I'll hold the tape on 100 millimetres. I'm then going to measure down to my bird's mouth. So my bird's mouth there, from the edge, is 960. Bevels that you're going to have to set up at this stage is a hip plumb cut, a hip seat cut, and a hip edge cut. So once you have your piece of wood you're going to cut your hip out of, measure down about 50 mil from the end, just square a line across the edge there. Get your hip plumb cut, and from that line mark down on one side, turn it over and mark down the other side. So I'll zoom in and show you that. So you can see at the top we've got our 50 mil line squared across, then we've marked our plumb cut down, we've turned it over to the other edge and marked our plumb cut down on that side as well. Then we're going to get our hip edge cut, our hip edge bevel, and we're going to mark that from that point there, so from the outside point where you mark that plumb cut, we're going to mark that across like that, and we're going to turn it over and mark that side as well. We have to cut off. So we cut this side of the line, cut across there and down there, and then we turn it over and do the same, cut this side of the line and cut that off there, and what we end up with is a small pointy section. Also, after you've marked your two edge cuts in, you can also mark a second plumb cut down, and that will give you a line to follow. So when we're cutting across here, I have a line this side as well as I have a line that side. As you're cutting the hip plumb cut on the bevel, now I have to follow the line across here, the line down this side, and the line down that side, all of this. Cut that with the plumb cut as well as the bevel cut for the hip, and now we're ready to mark for our bird's mouth. To get the depth of our square up at that line there, so it's sitting on top of the rafter and down to the edge of that top plate, where just measure roughly down from the point of your hip about the measurement of what we're about 882, so I'm going to mark about 900. Then with the square that we set on from the top of the rafter down to where our bird's mouth is, I'm going to then just do a seat line. I'm going to put a seat line across there, and then we can mark our bird's mouth in from there. Okay, now that we've got our seat line marked here, then we're going to then measure down to our measurement, which mine was 882. So where 882 intersects with that seat line is where I'm going to put a little mark like that, and that's going to be the start of my bird's mouth. So you can see that little mark there, which is the 882 measurement, where that sits in with my bird's mouth. So now what I'm going to do is get my bevel, my plumb cut bevel for my hip, and draw that line where it intersects my seat mark. I'm going to draw that. Now that is the same way as my top bevel. Then I'm going to get the seat cut, and I'm going to mark that in again at that same intersection. So we have the three lines intersecting. Ooh, we'll do that flat so I can do it properly. So we have the three lines intersecting here, the seat cut, the plumb cut, and that seat measurement that we got from our rafters. So where they all intersect is the bird's mouth, and where we're going to cut that out. So I'll then square that across the flat surface, square that across the edge, I mean, like that, like that. I'll then cut that section, that small section out, and test it. So once we've cut our bird's mouth out like we have marked, it's then time to test it. So we sit it in. It should sit flush with the two sides of the rafter, and the bird's mouth should sit in there beautifully. We've cut our rafters, both of them, they're ready to fit. So we can skew nail them down the same as we did with our normal rafters, through the top of the ridge, to the top of the rafter here, into it. We've fitted our hips here. Now our test to make sure that we got everything right is once again to put the straight edge on. Now the straight edge should line up with the tops of all of our rafters and this edge of the hip. does that side, I should also line up across the end here between the middle and the two hips, which it does. The next part we're going to do is fit our creeper rafters. Now our creeper rafters come off our hip rafters and down to the eaves, similar to what that is, like that. So the position, the cutting and positioning is similar to the hip rafter, but the first thing we need to do is mark its position and then measure its length. Rafter plumb cut, so we're back to our rafter plumb cut, and we also want our jack rafter edge cut, so you'll need to set those on your block of wood as well. Measure across from my rafter 300 here, that's going to be where my jack rafter is going to sit. I'll then measure from the same point across to my hip, and I will mark that there like that as well. Square that line across, put a cross where my hip rafter is going to sit, where my creeper rafter is going to sit, so where it's going to sit is like that there. I then measure from that point down to my bird's mouth, and we're up to marking our creeper or jack rafter. We need our rafter plumb cut and our jack rafter edge cut. We can also use the boat this time to mark our plumb cut if we like, and we are going to use the boat to mark our seat cut. So firstly we mark our plumb cut down there. So I'll mark it this side so you can see it. So there's our rafter plumb cut. Now our edge cut, depending on which one of the jack rafters you're doing, if you're doing this one here, your edge cut will go in that direction there. So you do have to have a look at it to make sure that you are marking it the right way. And then I'll mark the plumb cut the other side as well, so I can see exactly where I need to cut that off at this stage. So I'll cut that off. So that now has cut the bevel and the plumb cut ready for my jack rafter there. That's it.